The great chamber of the Galactic Council stretched wider than any cathedral, its walls lined with banners of alien empires, each symbol shining under golden lights. The air was heavy with the sound of laughter, sharp and cruel, echoing from the tiered seats where the galaxy's most powerful rulers sat today. They looked down at the center stage, where a lone human envoy stood, his figure dwarfed by the vastness of the hall. He wore no crown, no armor, only the plain formal suit of his office, but his eyes were sharp, his hands clenched behind his back. He had come to speak for Earth, but no one in the chamber cared for his words. They had already made their decision before he arrived. One alien, tall and scaled with a voice that hissed like fire, rose from his throne and addressed the chamber. He declared that humanity was reckless, too wild to be trusted, too dangerous to hold power. His words dripped with arrogance as he reminded the council of past wars, the times when humans had fought not with diplomacy but with fire and blood. Other rulers chuckled, adding their voices to his. One with silver skin and 4 arms slammed his hand against the table and sneered that humans were little more than predators in clothes, a species that could never be tamed. Another, with glowing eyes and wings folded tightly against its back, mocked Earth's request for respect, calling it a child demanding the crown of kings. Their laughter rose again, filling the chamber like a storm of mockery. The human envoy did not move. His face was calm, his voice silent, but inside his chest burned a fire hotter than any star. He listened as one after another cast their vote, raising their hands, their voices proud as they stripped Earth of its seat in the council. Each vote was a dagger, each word another insult carved into history. At the end, the head of the council, a towering figure with skin of stone, struck the final blow. With a voice that thundered through the hall, he declared that Earth's voice was erased. Humanity no longer held a place in the galaxy's decisions. Humanity would be nothing more than an observer, a species to be managed, silenced, and forgotten. The chamber erupted in applause, claws and hands slamming against tables, voices cheering in cruel delight. To them, it was a victory, proof that their rule was secure, that one of the last threats to their power had been buried. Some leaned forward, mocking the envoy directly, asking him if humans would cry now, or beg, or perhaps lash out like the animals they were accused of being. But the envoy gave them nothing. His silence was sharper than any words. He bowed his head, his hands still behind his back, and turned without speaking. His footsteps echoed against the stone floor as he walked out of the chamber, the laughter of the council following him like chains. But silence was not weakness. Inside the envoy's mind, behind his calm mask, a storm raged. Every insult, every laugh, every vote carved itself into his memory like fire into steel. He had come to the chamber knowing the council would deny Earth, but he had not come unprepared. He knew what the council did not. Humanity's silence was only on the surface. Beneath, in the shadows of Earth, something far greater was stirring. He walked with steady steps, his face cold as stone, while deep inside he promised that this verdict would not be the end of humanity. It would be the beginning of something the galaxy was not ready to face. Outside the chamber, alien journalists and officials crowded the hallways, their lenses flashing, their questions sharp as knives. They shouted at the envoy, asking if Earth felt shame, if humans now understood their place. The envoy gave no answer. He walked past them in silence, his eyes fixed forward, his face unreadable. Some thought his silence meant defeat. Others thought it meant humanity had finally been broken. But none of them could see the truth burning inside his eyes. He was not defeated. He was waiting. Back inside the chamber, the council continued their celebration. They raised glasses filled with glowing liquids, toasted to their power, and congratulated themselves for their wisdom. To them, the humans were finished, a species too small to matter, too loud to tolerate, too dangerous to include. They believed they had silenced Earth forever. But in their laughter, they revealed their arrogance. They forgot the oldest truth whispered through the galaxy's history, that humans, once provoked, never stayed silent for long. The envoy returned to his ship in silence, the stars stretching wide outside the windows. As the vessel pulled away from the council station, he stood alone at the glass, his reflection sharp against the darkness. His hands unclenched at last, his jaw tight, his eyes glowing with resolve. He whispered words no alien could hear. "You think we are silent. You think we are gone. But we are not. And when we rise, we will not ask for a seat. We will take the throne." His words were not a threat. They were a promise. And in that silent moment, as the human envoy disappeared into the void, the galaxy celebrated a victory it did not truly win. For while the Council believed they had ended Earth's voice, they had only lit the spark of something far more dangerous. A storm was coming, born of silence, sharpened by rage, and carried on the shoulders of a species that had never accepted chains. The galaxy thought they had silenced humanity. But humanity was listening, preparing, and waiting for the day when the laughter of the Council would turn into screams. The Galactic Council's verdict spread across the stars like wildfire. News stations on alien worlds broadcasted the announcement with smug certainty, repeating the same words: "Humanity has been denied. Earth is silent." On glittering colonies and sprawling space stations, alien citizens laughed and celebrated as if a great danger had been removed. They spoke of how the humans had been troublesome in the past, too bold, too violent, too unpredictable to ever fit among the so-called civilized species of the galaxy. To most, the decision felt final, like a cage being shut forever. But on Earth, far from the shining halls of the Council, the verdict was received in silence. The streets did not erupt with fear. The skies did not fall. Instead, in bunkers buried deep beneath oceans and mountains, in hidden chambers shielded from alien eyes, humanity listened and quietly began to move. Generals gathered in secret halls where the walls hummed with power from hidden machines. Maps of the galaxy glowed across the tables, dotted with the positions of alien fleets and Council-controlled worlds. Around the room sat men and women who had been preparing for this moment long before the verdict was cast. They did not look shocked, for they had expected this outcome. They had seen the arrogance in the alien rulers' faces, had felt their hatred like poison. For decades, Earth had been building in silence, preparing for the day when the galaxy would finally show its true colors. Humanity's leaders had never trusted the Council's promises, and now that distrust had been proven right. The human envoy returned from the Council chamber to Earth, his face cold and unreadable. Before the cameras of alien news stations, he had been silent, showing no hint of defiance. But when he entered the underground command center, his voice was like steel cutting through the air. He told them everything: the laughter, the insults, the way the Council had stripped humanity of dignity with a smile. His words filled the hall, and every soldier, every scientist, every leader present felt their blood burn. But the envoy did not speak of despair. Instead, he spoke of opportunity. "They think we are broken," he said, his voice calm but sharp. "They think we are silent. But silence is a weapon, and they have given us the reason to use it." His words were met not with fear, but with grim nods. Humanity's silence was not weakness. It was preparation. Across the world, hidden projects began to stir. Deep beneath the seas, colossal shipyards roared to life, ancient machines unveiling warships that had been forged in secret. Their black hulls gleamed under the dim lights, their cannons larger than anything the Council had seen. Beneath the deserts, armored divisions rolled out from caverns where they had slept for decades, their engines growling like beasts awakened from hibernation. In orbit, satellite networks reactivated, their signals carrying encrypted orders to colonies thought abandoned. Humanity's quiet strength spread its wings, and though the galaxy could not see it, the storm was already gathering. In quiet moments, Earth's people remembered the insult. The Council had not just denied them a seat. They had tried to erase their place in history, to reduce them to silence and obedience. Mothers told their children of what had been said, voices steady but fierce, so the young would never forget the insult carved against their people. Veterans of old wars clenched their fists, remembering battles fought against alien fleets, battles that had once nearly brought the galaxy to its knees. Farmers and workers lifted their eyes to the stars, whispering promises that humanity would not remain voiceless forever. This was no longer only a political wound. It was personal, burned into the very soul of Earth. Meanwhile, in the Council's chamber, Alien leaders celebrated their decision as if it were victory. But even among them, doubt began to whisper. Some of the older species remembered fragments of the past, stories passed down from ancestors who had fought humans long ago. They remembered battles that had ended in fire, soldiers who refused to surrender, fleets that tore through stronger enemies with sheer willpower. These rulers did not laugh with the others. They sat in silence, uneasy, wondering if the council had just made the greatest mistake in galactic history. But pride is a blinding force, and the louder voices silenced them, declaring that humanity had been caged at last. Back on Earth, the envoy stood alone on a balcony overlooking the hidden shipyards. Below him, Titanic vessels slowly rose from their docks, their engines glowing faintly as they prepared for the void. He thought of the council's laughter, their mocking voices, their arrogance. His hands curled into fists, and his eyes narrowed at the stars. "They will regret this," he whispered. "They wanted to silence us. Instead, they have given us the reason to roar." In that moment, Earth was no longer silent. Its silence had transformed into resolve. Plans long hidden were now in motion, soldiers long waiting were ready, and machines long sleeping were alive again. Humanity did not want a seat at the council's table anymore. Humanity would take the whole table, tear down its legs, and build something greater in its place. The galaxy believed it had silenced Earth forever. But in the quiet corners of space, in the shadows where alien eyes could not see, a storm was building, one that would sweep across the stars and remind every empire why humanity had always been feared. Deep beneath Earth's surface, where the stars could not reach and alien eyes had never seen, the heart of humanity's secret burned awake. The vaults and shipyards hidden for generations were no longer quiet tombs but roaring forges of war. The verdict of the Galactic Council had not broken humanity, it had freed them from the pretense of diplomacy. Engineers worked without rest, sparks flying from ancient machines as they welded together the skeletons of warships. Entire hangars shook as engines were tested, rumbling like thunder beneath the mountains. Vast steel doors opened for the first time in centuries, releasing the air of hidden chambers where humanity had preserved its future in silence. Inside one of these colossal vaults lay humanity's greatest secret, the hidden arsenal. Rows of ships stretched further than the eye could see, each one built in darkness, each one crafted with technology far beyond what the Council believed humans possessed. Their designs were sharp and brutal, forged not for beauty but for survival. Black hulls built from alloys unknown to the galaxy gleamed in the dim light, their surfaces layered with weapons that had never been fired in battle. These were not mere vessels. They were predators, waiting in silence, dreaming of the day when the galaxy would wake them. That day had come. Soldiers walked the decks of the awakened ships, their boots echoing like drums of war. They were men and women whose blood carried the memory of battles long past. Their armor was dark, reinforced with plates designed to withstand weapons the Council had thought humanity could never endure. Their training was relentless, their faces marked by the calm focus of warriors who understood what was at stake. They spoke little, their silence not from fear but from determination. Every movement was practiced, precise. Humanity was not improvising. Humanity had been preparing. In the command halls, leaders studied glowing maps of the galaxy, their eyes sharp as they traced the lines of trade routes, military outposts, and council strongholds. They had watched and recorded for years, gathering intelligence while pretending to be weak. They knew where the fleets patrolled, where the supply chains were vulnerable, where the Council's pride left it blind. For too long, Earth had bowed its head and let the galaxy think them tamed. Now that mask had fallen away. The Council had stripped Earth of its seat, but in doing so, they had stripped away the last restraint holding humanity back. The human envoy, who had stood silent in the Council chamber while laughter surrounded him, now stood at the center of the War Council on Earth. His calm mask was gone, replaced by fire. He spoke of the insult, of the way alien rulers had mocked Earth as dangerous and wild. "They call us predators," he said, his voice echoing across the chamber. "Then let them learn what it means to wake a predator. Let them learn what silence has forged." His words were met with fists pounding the table, with voices swearing loyalty not to revenge alone, but to justice. Humanity would no longer ask for respect. They would demand it with fire. All across Earth, the awakening spread. Civilians who had once lived ordinary lives were called to service, trained to fight, to repair, to build. Factories that had produced tools and machines for peace now turned to war, their lines crafting armor, weapons, and ammunition. The skies above Earth filled with the shadows of rising ships, each one carrying the promise of a storm the galaxy had never seen. Humanity was not simply preparing for defense. They were preparing to take the throne. Beyond Earth, signals reached colonies that the Council had believed abandoned. Outposts hidden in asteroid belts, bases built into the sides of moons, stations buried in dust-covered planets, all lit with life once more. Lights flickered on, engines roared awake, and humanity's reach stretched far wider than the Council had ever imagined. The galaxy had thought Earth was alone. In truth, Earth was the heart of a web stretching across hidden corners of space, each thread now pulling tight, ready to strangle those who had mocked them. And as the arsenal awakened, whispers began to spread through the stars. Traders, smugglers, and spies carried fragments of truth to alien worlds. They spoke of black warships rising from Earth, of human fleets gathering in silence, of soldiers with eyes burning like fire. The Council tried to silence these rumors, but the fear was faster than their lies. In the streets of alien cities, people whispered in terror, "The humans are not gone. The humans are preparing." In one chamber of the arsenal, the largest of all ships stirred. It was a Titan, a battleship designed not just to fight but to dominate. Its hull stretched longer than alien dreadnoughts, its cannons capable of tearing through fleets. It had been kept in darkness, its systems cold, until now. Lights spread across its surface as it powered to life, engines glowing with the strength of 1,000 suns. Soldiers standing before it felt their chests tighten with pride. This was more than a ship. This was a symbol, a promise, a throne forged in steel and fire. The humans knew the Council would not sit quietly after their verdict. Already, alien fleets were gathering, preparing to crush Earth if it dared resist. But humanity did not tremble. In the silence of their arsenals, they sharpened their claws. Their silence was no longer the silence of weakness. It was the silence before the storm. And when the storm came, the galaxy would learn what it meant to deny Earth a voice. Humanity had been denied a seat, but soon, they would not ask for one. They would take the entire throne, and the galaxy itself would bow. The first strike came like a whisper in the dark, swift and sharp enough to shake the galaxy before anyone understood what had happened. An alien patrol fleet, 50 ships strong, had been stationed on the far edge of Council territory. Their orders simple: monitor trade routes, guard supply lanes, and keep the smaller species obedient. They expected peace, as they always had. Humanity had been declared silent, erased from the Council, and no one believed Earth had the power to act. Yet when the fleet jumped into a sector near a barren system, they found something waiting in the void, something black, massive, and bristling with weapons that did not appear in any Council records. The patrol's commander was arrogant, like most Council captains. He laughed when his senses picked up the strange human fleet. He thought they were smugglers or old scavengers daring to fly in Council space. He ordered them to stand down, to power off their weapons, to surrender their ships. But the humans answered with silence. Then, without warning, their cannons roared. The first volley ripped through the alien flagship, tearing its hull apart before its shields could respond. The explosion lit the void, scattering debris across the stars. Panic filled the alien crews as one ship after another was struck with perfect precision. The humans did not waste fire. Every shot counted. Every strike destroyed. Within minutes, half the patrol fleet was reduced to flaming wrecks. The survivors tried to retreat, engines screaming, but the human ships were faster. They moved like predators in water, surrounding and crushing the aliens with ruthless efficiency. The last ship transmitted a desperate signal to the Council, but even as the message went out, its hull split apart, vanishing in a burst of fire. The battle was over in less than 20 minutes. The void grew quiet again, filled only with drifting wreckage. Human warships lingered among the ruins, scanning the debris before transmitting a single message across the sector. The signal was simple and cold: "You tried to silence us. We are awake." That message spread faster than light, bouncing from relay to relay, slipping past the Council's sensors. Within days, the entire galaxy had heard it. And with it came terror. In the Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council, the rulers screamed at one another in panic. Reports flooded their tables, each one worse than the last. Trade routes disrupted, colonies whispering of rebellion, fleets refusing to move forward out of fear. Humanity had not begged for their seat back, they had struck with fire. The Council's arrogance shattered under the weight of fear. One alien ruler with wings slammed his talons on the table, demanding that the humans be exterminated before they could spread further. Another, older and quieter, warned that the first strike was not random. It was a message, and if the Council miscalculated, it would become a war they could not contain. The human envoy, who had left the chamber in silence before, did not return to speak this time. Instead, his voice came through captured Council channels, cold and steady. He told them that humanity had no interest in begging for a place at their table. "We asked for respect once," he said, "and you laughed. Now we will not ask again. We will take what you tried to deny us." His words filled the chamber with silence. For the first time, the alien rulers saw themselves not as masters of the galaxy but as prey. On distant worlds, alien civilians watched the news in fear. They saw images of shattered patrol ships drifting in space, human war banners painted across their wrecks. Some wept, terrified of the stories returning to life, the legends of humans who had fought until death, who had burned fleets with nothing but fury and will. Others whispered with hope, especially those who had long suffered under the Council's heavy hand. Perhaps, they thought, the humans were not a threat to everyone. Perhaps they were a storm that would break the Council's chains. Meanwhile, on Earth, the celebrations were silent, grim, and filled with determination. Soldiers watched the recordings of the battle, their pride burning quietly in their eyes. Engineers worked faster, bringing more warships from the hidden arsenal into the void. Generals planned the next strike, their maps glowing with red lines cutting deep into Council space. The first victory was only the beginning. Humanity had bared its teeth, and now the galaxy would learn how sharp they were. The Alien Council tried to respond with propaganda, flooding broadcasts with claims that humanity's strike was nothing more than luck, a desperate attack that would soon be crushed. But even as they spoke, more fleets began to move into human traps. Small outposts went dark. Distant garrisons stopped transmitting. Every disappearance left the galaxy trembling, wondering where the humans would strike next. The silence of Earth had turned into something far worse, an unpredictable storm, moving without warning, striking without mercy. In a secret chamber, the Council leaders gathered again, their voices low, their faces pale. They admitted the truth they had denied for centuries. Humanity had not been weak. Humanity had been patient. The seat they had denied was never the prize. The humans had aimed higher, and now their claws reached for the very throne of the galaxy itself. On Earth, the envoy stood once more before the glowing stars on his map. His voice was steady, his face calm. "They thought they silenced us," he said, "but our silence was a blade. Now, with every strike, they will learn. We are not here for a seat at their table. We are here to take the whole throne." His soldiers nodded, their voices silent but their hearts roaring with fire. The first strike had been made, and now the galaxy waited in dread for the next. The frozen void stretched wide, filled with wreckage and whispers. The galaxy had mocked humanity's silence. Now that silence had been broken, and in its place came a storm that no empire could contain. The Alien Council chamber, once filled with arrogant laughter, now trembled with unease. The memory of the first strike weighed on every ruler present. Holograms of wrecked patrol fleets floated above their tables, showing alien ships broken and scattered like toys across the void. The humans had not only attacked, they had sent a message that burned sharper than any weapon. Earth was no longer silent. The rulers shouted over one another, their voices desperate and shrill. Some demanded full retaliation, Every fleet, every soldier, every weapon sent to crush humanity before their fire spread. Others, pale and uneasy, urged caution, whispering that humanity's strike was not a reckless act but a carefully planned move. The chamber fractured, and in their division, fear grew heavier than their pride. But the humans did not wait for the Council's decision. Far from alien eyes, humanity's fleet began to expand outward, not with noise, but with precision. Ships cloaked in black hulls slipped into trade routes, intercepting convoys meant for Council worlds. Alien merchants who had once laughed at Earth's silence now screamed as their cargo ships burned, their wreckage left to drift as warnings. Human war banners, crimson and steel, were painted on the remains of every destroyed vessel. Entire sectors began to whisper with dread. The humans are taking the stars. Back on Earth, the command halls roared with activity. Generals moved markers across glowing maps, showing one victory after another. Colonies that had been abandoned by the Council reached out to Earth, offering quiet support. Refugees from oppressed alien species slipped into human-controlled sectors, carrying secrets and information in exchange for protection. Humanity did not only fight with weapons. They fought with promises. They promised the broken species of the galaxy what the Council never could: freedom. And with every promise, Earth's shadow grew larger. In the deep vaults, the hidden arsenal continued to awaken. More ships, massive and bristling with firepower, rose into the void. Their engines glowed like suns, their weapons systems tested with ruthless precision. Factories across Earth worked day and night, turning every ounce of steel into armor, every drop of fuel into fire. Soldiers trained with merciless discipline, their bodies sharpened, their minds unyielding. They knew they were outnumbered. They knew the Council's fleet stretched across thousands of worlds. But they also knew that numbers had never broken humanity. Humanity had always been the smaller force, the underestimated predator. And predators thrived in the shadows of arrogance. The second human strike was even sharper than the first. This time, they did not target a patrol or a convoy. They struck a Council fortress world, one that had stood for centuries as a symbol of alien dominance. It was a planet wrapped in rings of defense stations, guarded by fleets larger than most empires could muster. The Council believed it untouchable. But when the humans arrived, they came not with one fleet, but with many, hidden in the dark, moving like blades cutting through water. The battle began with silence. The alien defenders laughed when their scanners detected the first human warships. They believed they were facing a small raid, a desperate attempt to show strength. They moved their fleets forward with arrogance, confident the fight would be short. But then the void itself came alive. Human ships burst from hidden positions, cannons blazing. Drones swarmed like hornets, diving into alien shields and detonating inside their formations. Human soldiers in dropships rained down onto the planet's surface, their armor black against the skies, their rifles spitting fire as they stormed the fortresses. The alien commanders screamed in disbelief as their defenses crumbled. Entire rings of orbital stations exploded one after another, their wrecks scattering into the void. Fleets that had stood for centuries shattered in hours. On the ground, human boots thundered through the Council's proud halls, tearing down banners that had flown for generations. When the smoke cleared, the fortress world that had once been a jewel of alien power now burned under Earth's flag. Humanity did not destroy it. They claimed it. The message was clear. Humanity was not just defending itself. Humanity was advancing. They were not asking for respect. They were taking it by force. The news spread across the galaxy like a storm. On Council worlds, civilians whispered in terror, asking if humanity would come for them next. Soldiers muttered in fear, their hands shaking as they prepared for orders to march against the Deathworlders. But not all whispers were fearful. In the shadows of oppressed colonies, in the streets of planets crushed by Council taxes and chains, whispers carried hope. They spoke of humans who fought not only for themselves but for all who had been silenced. Species that had lived for centuries under the Council's iron rule began to raise their heads, wondering if humanity's rise was the beginning of their own freedom. Inside the alien Council chamber, chaos grew worse. The rulers who had once mocked humanity now screamed in fury, demanding answers. How had Earth built fleets without their knowledge? How had humans hidden weapons beneath the Council's gaze? No answer came, only silence. The silence of their ignorance. Humanity had fooled them for centuries, and now they were paying the price. Some rulers begged for negotiation, desperate to stop the tide. But others, their pride unbroken, vowed to fight to the bitter end. And in the silence of their arguing, one truth became clear. Humanity was no longer asking for a seat at the table. They were pulling the table out from under the Council, piece by piece, world by world. Back on Earth, the envoy watched the stars from his warship's bridge. His face was calm, but his eyes burned with fire. He spoke softly, but his words carried the weight of destiny. They thought our silence was weakness. Now they see it was a blade. We will not stop until the throne is ours. And across the galaxy, the Council's throne began to tremble. The galaxy had never seen fear spread so quickly. In only a matter of weeks, the once untouchable Council was drowning in reports of human strikes. Patrol fleets vanished without a trace. Supply convoys burned in the void, their wreckage marked with the crimson and steel insignia of Earth. Fortress worlds that had stood as symbols of alien dominance fell silent, their banners torn down, replaced with the rising emblem of humanity. What had begun as a cruel insult, the silencing of Earth, had unleashed a storm no alien ruler could contain. In the Council chamber, the rulers shouted in desperation. Their grand voices, once filled with arrogance, now trembled with doubt. Holograms of human fleets dominated the center of the hall, ships black as night with weapons that cut through defenses like paper. Generals spoke of strategies, of sending greater forces, of rallying every empire into one unstoppable armada. But for every plan, reports arrived of another defeat. The humans did not fight like the Council expected. They did not meet in open battle for the sake of pride. They struck where it hurt, melted into the shadows, then struck again. They turned the galaxy's own trade routes and supply chains into traps. No fortress was safe, no fleet untouchable. The Council had mocked humanity as wild and dangerous. Now, those words became their greatest fear. Meanwhile, humanity was not celebrating victories with cheers. On Earth and across hidden colonies, the mood was grim, disciplined, unbroken. Soldiers sharpened their blades, loaded their rifles, and drilled in endless silence. Engineers bent over glowing consoles, forging weapons that had been hidden for generations, repairing ships that had never seen battle until now. Civilians worked day and night in factories, not out of fear but pride, knowing every bolt, every round of ammunition would fuel the war that would decide their species' future. Humanity was awake, and for them, there was no going back to silence. The human envoy, once mocked in the Council chamber, now stood aboard the flagship of the rising fleet. His voice carried through encrypted channels across every warship, steady as stone, cold as iron. He reminded them of the insult, the day Earth's voice was stripped away, the laughter that had filled the chamber. They thought we would bow, he said, but humanity does not kneel. They tried to silence us. Now we will show them the cost of their arrogance. We will not stop until the galaxy itself hears only our voice. His soldiers roared in response, but it was not the roar of chaos. It was the roar of purpose. The next campaign began with calculated precision. Humanity struck deeper into Council territory, choosing not only military targets but worlds that symbolized alien pride. One by one, Council worlds that had once glittered with wealth and authority trembled as human fleets surrounded them. Some surrendered immediately, lowering their banners in exchange for mercy. Others fought desperately, but resistance only sharpened humanity's blade. With every victory, Earth's shadow grew. And with every defeat, the Council's throne shook harder. On alien streets, fear mixed with whispers of hope. Oppressed species, long chained by the Council's taxes and military might, began to rise. Small rebellions flared across the galaxy, inspired by the sight of human banners flying where alien power once ruled. For the first time in centuries, the Council's control faltered, not from within, but from the outside force they had thought erased from history. Humanity was not only fighting for itself, It had become the symbol of defiance for all. But the council was not yet broken. Desperate and cornered, the rulers called upon their greatest fleets, mustering forces from every empire under their control. They gathered at the center of their domain, building an armada so vast it darkened the stars. Tens of thousands of ships, bristling with weapons, united under one purpose: to crush humanity before their rise became unstoppable. The council promised their people that this final blow would erase the humans forever. But even as their fleet gathered, unease whispered in the commanders' hearts. The humans had already defied the odds. What if even this was not enough? Back on Earth's flagship, the envoy studied the council's movements. His maps glowed with the positions of enemy fleets, their strength vast beyond measure. Around him, generals argued, some warning that the numbers were impossible to face. But the envoy only stared at the stars, his jaw tight, his eyes unblinking. They believe numbers will save them, he said quietly. But they do not understand humanity. We have never needed more. We only need enough. Plans were drawn, traps set, fleets hidden in the folds of the void. Humanity was preparing not for survival, but for domination. The council believed they had forced Earth into silence. In truth, they had given Earth the perfect weapon: anger sharpened by patience, silence forged into steel. The galaxy held its breath. The largest armada in history was preparing to strike. The humans, outnumbered and underestimated once again, stood ready to meet them. The storm that had begun in silence now roared across the stars. And in its heart stood humanity, no longer asking for respect, no longer begging for a seat, but preparing to seize the throne of the galaxy itself. The stars burned bright over the council's heartworld as the greatest armada in galactic history assembled. Tens of thousands of alien warships, their hulls gleaming with polished steel and glowing shields, floated in tight formation, blotting out the skies above the capital. Every empire under the council's banner had sent its fleets: massive dreadnoughts from the winged species, swarm ships from insectoid hives, leviathan carriers from scaled reptilian lords. Together they formed a wall of firepower so vast that even the most arrogant rulers believed no enemy could withstand it. The council had staked everything on this show of force. If humanity was not broken here, then the galaxy itself would never be safe from them again. Inside the capital's grand chamber, alien leaders shouted with hollow confidence. They boasted that this time, the humans would be erased forever, crushed by numbers too overwhelming to resist. Yet behind their words, unease lingered. The stories of human victories had spread too far, carried on whispers through soldiers and citizens alike. The images of shattered fleets, of fortress worlds burning under Earth's banner, could not be forgotten. And now, as the council prepared to unleash its full power, every commander felt the same unspoken fear. What if humanity was ready? Far away, hidden in the cold folds of space, humanity was indeed ready. On the bridge of the flagship, the envoy stood before a vast star map, watching the alien fleet's movements with calm eyes. Around him, generals pointed to the sheer size of the armada, warning that even humanity's newly awakened arsenal could not match it in open combat. The envoy did not argue. He simply raised his hand and traced the paths of the alien fleets across the map. They believe they are marching into war, he said softly. But they are walking into a trap. We do not need to fight their numbers. We only need to break their will. The human plan had been set long before the council gathered its armada. Fleets hidden in asteroid belts, warships cloaked in dark systems, stations disguised as empty ruins, all had been placed with precision. Humanity had watched the council for centuries, and now every weakness, every blind spot was being exploited. The alien fleet, vast as it was, would not be met head-on. It would be bled piece by piece, forced to break apart until it collapsed under its own weight. The first clash came when the alien armada moved through a narrow corridor of stars, believing it a shortcut toward Earth's claimed sectors. Hidden mines, dormant for decades, ignited all at once. Explosions tore through the leading formations, shredding dozens of ships in seconds. As the survivors scrambled to reform, human warships burst from the void, firing with ruthless precision. Alien captains screamed as their ships were ripped apart, their proud formations shattered. Then, Just as quickly as they appeared, the human fleets vanished back into the darkness, leaving behind only wreckage and fear. Across the galaxy, the pattern repeated. Supply convoys meant to feed the Council's vast fleet disappeared into silence. Outposts built to serve as rally points were already burning when reinforcements arrived. Everywhere the Council turned, humanity was waiting. The massive alien fleet, once united, began to fracture as commanders pulled away to defend their own territories, leaving gaps that widened with every loss. The Council had come to crush Earth in one overwhelming strike, but humanity refused to give them the battle they wanted. Instead, they gave them death in shadows, fire in silence, victory through patience. And then came the moment that shook the galaxy. A human fleet, smaller than the alien forces by thousands, appeared directly outside the Council's capital system. Alien generals screamed in disbelief, convinced it was a trick. But the humans did not hide. Their warships advanced slowly, their black hulls gleaming like blades, their banners shining against the stars. It was not an attack. It was a challenge. The envoy's voice cut through every channel, reaching every ship in the alien fleet. His tone was calm, steady, unshaken. You thought you silenced us. You thought we were weak. But look at us now. We stand at your gates. You do not face a desperate species. You face humanity, awake and unbroken. We are not here to beg for a seat at your table. We are here to take your throne. The words struck harder than any weapon. Across the alien fleets, soldiers trembled. Many had fought in the battles against humans already, and they knew the truth of those words. Their commanders barked orders, but the fear was too deep, spreading like fire through dry grass. Some ships broke formation, retreating before the battle even began. Others hesitated, their guns locked but their will crumbling. The humans did not wait. Their fleet surged forward, smaller but faster, striking with precision that tore through the alien lines. Every human shot was a death sentence, every maneuver a humiliation to fleets that had believed themselves invincible. Alien commanders screamed for their soldiers to fight, but morale was already shattered. Whole divisions turned and fled, unwilling to face the predators they had once mocked. By the time the battle ended, the skies above the Council's capital were littered with the wreckage of alien ships. Human war banners floated across the void, carried on signals that reached every corner of the galaxy. The Council, once the unshakable center of power, had been broken in its own heart. On the bridge of his flagship, the envoy watched in silence as the enemy ships scattered. He did not smile. His eyes were steady, his voice calm as he gave the final order, advance. The throne is within reach. And in that moment, the galaxy realized the truth. Humanity had not simply survived the Council's insult. Humanity was rising to claim the galaxy itself. What had started as silence had become fire, and now that fire burned at the very heart of the Council's power. The throne was trembling, and Earth's shadow stretched over it. The storm was no longer coming. The storm was here. The skies above the Council's capital still smoldered with the wreckage of broken fleets, their twisted hulls drifting like graves across the void. The once proud alien armada, tens of thousands strong, had fractured and fled, leaving the very heart of galactic power exposed. Where once there had been certainty and arrogance, now there was only silence. But it was not the silence of peace. It was the silence before submission. Humanity's fleet, smaller yet unbroken, black-hulled and bristling with firepower, moved steadily into orbit above the Council's shining throne world. Their banners shimmered against the stars, crimson and steel, a mark the galaxy could no longer ignore. On the surface, panic swept through the capital. The streets that had once gleamed with wealth and alien splendor now echoed with the rush of terrified citizens. Crowds surged toward shelters, their voices filled with fear as they repeated the same words, "The humans are here." The memory of the envoy's challenge, the promise to take not just a seat, but the throne itself, haunted every corner of the city. Soldiers stood trembling at their posts, their weapons clutched in shaking hands. They had been taught that humanity was a threat, but also that humanity had been silenced. Now, with Earth's fleet hanging above their skies, they realized the truth they had never wanted to believe. Inside the grand chamber, the alien rulers gathered once more. The vast hall, which had been built to symbolize unshakable power, now trembled under the weight of fear. Their voices rose in desperation, some demanding surrender, others crying for negotiations, a few still clinging to pride and insisting on resistance. But their words fell hollow. They had already seen what humanity could do. They had seen fleets shattered, fortresses burned, and worlds fall one after another. The Council's throne, once untouchable, now stood at the edge of collapse. It was in this chaos that the human envoy entered. He did not arrive alone. Behind him marched soldiers clad in dark armor, their faces hidden, their steps echoing like drums of war. Their rifles gleamed beneath the chamber's golden lights, and their presence silenced every alien voice. The envoy stepped to the center of the hall, his figure small compared to the towering rulers around him, but his presence filled the chamber with a weight no alien could deny. His eyes swept across them, cold and unblinking, before his voice cut through the silence. "You thought you could erase us," he said, his tone calm but heavy as stone. "You laughed as you stripped Earth of its voice. You believed our silence meant weakness. But silence is a weapon. And now, your laughter has become your chains." The rulers shifted uneasily, some glaring with hate, others unable to meet his gaze. None spoke. The envoy stepped closer to the throne, the massive seat of authority carved from metals mined across conquered worlds. It had stood for millennia as the symbol of the Council's rule, a place no human had ever been allowed to touch. Now, under the watchful eyes of his soldiers, the envoy placed his hand upon it. "We will not beg for a seat at your table," he continued. "We will not kneel for scraps of respect. You tried to silence humanity, but instead you gave us reason to rise. And we have risen, not to sit among you, but to stand above you. From this day forward, this throne belongs not to your arrogance, but to Earth." Gasps rippled through the chamber. Some rulers shouted in protest, their voices breaking with desperation. But the sound of human boots stepping closer drowned them out. The envoy turned and sat upon the throne, his soldiers raising Earth's banner above the Council's symbol. The crimson and steel flag unfurled across the chamber, its colors burning like fire against the golden walls. In that moment, the Council was no longer alien. It was human. Across the galaxy, the message spread. Every ship, every colony, every station received the transmission. They saw the image of the human envoy seated upon the throne, the Council silenced around him, the human banner raised in defiance. To the oppressed species, it was hope, proof that the Council's rule could be broken. To the arrogant empires, it was terror, the realization that humanity had not only returned but had claimed the heart of power itself. Outside, humanity's fleet maintained its silent vigil. They did not fire, did not destroy. They simply held the skies, their presence alone enough to remind the galaxy that Earth was awake, and Earth would no longer be ignored. Soldiers on the ground marched through the streets of the capital, not as conquerors drunk on victory, but as guardians enforcing a new order. They tore down banners of alien dominance and replaced them with the mark of humanity. Where alien citizens cowered, human soldiers stood calm, offering them no cruelty, only the undeniable truth. The galaxy had a new master. The envoy, seated upon the throne, spoke once more into the chamber and across the stars. His voice was steady, his words carved with finality. "This is the end of your council. This is the beginning of ours. You thought to silence us. Instead, you gave us the reason to claim everything. The throne is ours now, and the galaxy will hear humanity's voice for the rest of time." And so it was done. The Council had mocked Earth, and Earth had answered not with pleas, but with power. What had begun as silence ended in thunder. Humanity had risen from insult to dominance, from exile to empire. They had taken not just a seat at the table, but the throne itself. And the galaxy, once certain of its rulers, now trembled beneath the shadow of a single word that would define its future: humanity.